How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and in this particular episode, we're going to be breaking down and diving into some wide receiver tiers and rankings for Week 11 fantasy football. This video is being recorded late Wednesday evening, so you'll be seeing this video Thursday morning or later. And this is, of course, before the Thursday Night Football matchup, so we haven't seen any football yet this week. I'm able to get this video out an extra day early for you guys to make sure you're able to see this, of course, and my predictions and opinions and whatnot pre-game action here for Week 11. So, as always, if you have any questions for me, put those down in the comment section below. We've got some awesome resources in the description of today's episode as well. As always, if you're looking to get a little bit more involved here with the community and find some extra stuff for help here. But, as always, we don't want to waste too much time in the episode, so let's dive right on into the first tier. All right, here we go with the first tier. I don't tend to spend too much time in the first couple of tiers here because we know who the best players in fantasy football tend to be each week. I will spend a little bit more time this week. However, we've got some shifting dynamics from the Cooper Kupp injury, him having ankle surgery and being placed in the IR. He's no longer here. We've also got some really unique weather circumstances to break down in today's episode, thus the reason Stephon Diggs doesn't make this first tier. Justin Jefferson, not too much needs to be said here. He almost went for 200 yards last week, had himself a phenomenal performance, of course, the catch, doing some really special things in that contest and throughout this season. He's actually on pace now for the first player ever to crack 2,000 receiving yards. Him and Tyreek Hill are kind of in a battle right now for that leadership role in terms of, that sounded weird, not necessarily leadership, although I'm sure they're both leaders on their team, but in terms of just statistically being a leader here for the league, Justin Jefferson, for me, is the man alone atop the hill for Week 11 fantasy football by himself in Tier 1. Let's dive into Tier 2. All right, next up here in Tier 2, we've got my wide receivers 2 through 6. So this is a pretty interesting category. Again, not spending too much time, but I will cover these players. CeeDee Lamb is my wide receiver 2 this week. Seems pretty odd to say this, given that a week ago I was viewing him as somewhat of a fringe wide receiver 1 each week. He had only had 13 total targets in game 1 and 2 with Dak Prescott combined, and then he goes out, has a season high 15 targets, including the overtime portion against Green Bay, and he also goes out there and is the first Cowboy receiver to have 100-plus yards this season. DeAndre Hopkins, by the way, CeeDee Lamb has Minnesota this week, a fairly decent matchup. Hopkins this week has San Francisco. Kyler Murray is still day-to-day with his hamstring injury. Whether or not he's on the field or not, I do have enough faith in Colt McCoy to go out there and facilitate distribution-like passes. Hopkins is a great route runner. He's a fantastic wide receiver, a great possession wide receiver. He should go out there and provide solid floor numbers regardless, but the ceiling, of course, we do expect to be better with some downfield passing opportunities brought forth from Kyler Murray. Devontae Adams here this week has a tough matchup against the Denver Broncos. Patrick Surtain has been a very high-level corner all season. This defense as a whole functionally has been the strength of this team. Now, the one area of concern, of course, is Denver's offense. That leads to a lot of opposing time of possession for opponents. Josh Jacobs went crazy in this matchup the first time around. Devontae Adams, it's not a great matchup, if we're being completely honest here. But he is a great player. If he gets his looks, there is the potential, of course, for one of those really strong games. A.J. Brown, I would actually potentially feel inclined to put him over Adams due to that matchup. Had I, had the understanding that he was 100% healthy here, but he rolled up on his ankle. There is a questionable designation leading into this game. It sounds like he's going to be fine. Sounds like he's going to play. Keep your eye on it, of course, throughout this week. Again, it is only Wednesday evening when I'm recording this video, so there's 2 more days left of practice for a lot of teams. So again, a lot can change in 48 hours in the National Football League, but for now, I'm going to be optimistic and plan on A.J. Brown playing here. This could, of course, and you'll see later, provide a bit of a boost to Devontae Smith in his evaluation for this week. And then Stephon Diggs, he's playing in a blizzard this week. That's the unique weather circumstance I talked about. I didn't have that information at my disposal in the start-sit segments for this week. Of course, Stephon Diggs was not involved in those videos, but it does kind of raise the question. If you're loaded at wide receiver, do you want to take the gamble that Buffalo, which is expected to get 4 to 6 feet of snow, like if that comes to fruition, you have that much snow on the field. Now they're going to be clearing it, but there's expected to be 20 to 30 mile per hour winds. This could be a absolutely terrible situation for air attack in this game for both the Browns and the Buffalo Bills. So keep your eyes glued on that. It could have devastating fantasy implications for pass catchers in this game, and you're going to see the lesser than elite players, Gabe Davis and Amari Cooper, take a major blow in my rankings this week as a result of that weather circumstance. Okay, so tier 3 here hosts my wide receivers 7 through 9 this week, starting it off with Amon-Ra St. Brown. The Detroit Lions and Amon-Ra have the New York Giants this week. Now, Amon-Ra playing the slot role for this team has a bit of a unique situation in weekly matchup due to that role in this team. But the bottom line here is if he continues to accumulate volume at the rate he's been getting since being fully healthy this year, he will be fine in this matchup. The Giants defense has been quite good in spots this season, but at the end of the day, it is just going to come down to volume and how much work he's able to get for this team. He still has not scored a touchdown since week 2. However, eventually here he's got to be due for one. He had himself a really nice game in week 10. T. Higgins taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is an interesting scenario. This is the only team so far, I believe, this season to play TJ Watt in the Pittsburgh defense twice, meaning that TJ Watt's been out for the majority of this year, and he was really the game wrecker in week 1 when these two teams squared off. He was forcing Joe Burrow to get rid of the football incredibly fast. He was wreaking havoc on the offensive line and just causing an absolute train wreck for the Bengals offensively. And at the end of the day, they had Jamar Chase in that week 1 matchup to lie back on, and they don't have that here. This is T. Higgins and his offense to lead from the receiving core in week 11, and they need him to step up here. So if he gets more volume and finally takes advantage of Chase's absence as an opportunity to be and command alpha level targets in this game, he could potentially creep up in, maybe outscore Stephon Diggs, given how that weather looks to potentially be a red flag for him. And then Terry McLaurin coming off of an absolutely fantastic Monday Night Football game where he led the charge offensively, especially in the downfield passing game, to be the catalyst for that team to continue moving the sticks and really have a chance to beat the undefeated at the time Philadelphia Eagles by double digits nonetheless. Terry is an incredibly good receiver. We know he represents here. The one problem we have with Terry McLaurin in fantasy football, especially when Taylor Heineke is at quarterback, is consistency. But what Taylor Heineke has showed us throughout this season is the ceiling for McLaurin on a weekly basis is far better with him under center. So I'll take it. This Houston matchup does have the likes of Derek Stingley in the backfield, or not the backfield, but the back end of the defense. They do have a strong secondary. They can be a tough matchup for opposing fantasy wide receivers. And like I said, that's not great news for the streaky nature of Terry McLaurin, but he is a good enough wide receiver that if he's going to get the football, he will separate, he will make contested catches, and it's just going to come down to how high are the quality of opportunities he gets this week. So this is where things get rather interesting and different from a lot of previous weeks to this point in the year. The drop-off seems to happen quite fast here in week 11 as a result of not only bye weeks, but you've also got the fact, just from the Seahawks alone, you're missing both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. You've got Christian Kirk out with the Jags. I'm sure there's others that I'm just not remembering off the top of my head here. But what it comes down to is you've also got injuries to two key wide receivers, Jamar Chase and Cooper Kupp, that could be active for this game that aren't. So you're just losing a lot of depth from the overall board here as it relates to this week's matchups. But Chris Olave taking on the Los Angeles Rams is our 10th ranked wide receiver for the week. Sounds very odd to put it that way. He's been a bit underwhelming as of late, but the target volume should continue to be there, or at least you'd assume he would bounce back and have those opportunities. This Saints offense has just been struggling as of late. In the contest, they didn't struggle. A 24-0 rout of the Raiders. They blew them out and didn't have a reason to pass the football. So it's been a couple of odd weeks here for Olave. Hopefully he can get back on track and take advantage of this. It's not the easiest matchup in the world. The Rams defense has been definitely the high point of their season, although it's not nearly as dominant as it's been in years past. But the opportunities will be there if Chris Olave just gets his targets. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk here, the gap looking very small at this current point in time. Deebo has been very underwhelming as of late, and Brandon Ayuk has stepped up into the fold. He has been the hot receiver in this offense. Now, I expect that role to shift around here. It's one of the reasons that I've been a bit more pessimistic on Brandon Ayuk as of late. But for this week's matchup, with the lack of other receivers we have here, and the fact that Deebo hasn't really reasserted himself post-injury as the clear alpha for this team, and his role has been a little bit different since CMC's entered the fray here, you've just got kind kind of some blurred lines. So for Deebo Samuel, both of these players, Ayuk and Samuel, taking on the Arizona Cardinals. I believe it's the Monday Night Football matchup this week. It's kind of a coin flip as to which direction things can go. They certainly can both produce and maintain fantasy success alongside one another, but it's also possible that we continue to see a trend of Brandon Ayuk delivering in the receiving game and Deebo being touchdown dependent or needing some extra juice in the run game. Allen Lazard against Tennessee, he'll be playing tonight, or at least the day you're watching this video go live. I still view him as the wide receiver 1 in this Packers offense, at least the most dependable threat and target for Aaron Rodgers to throw the football to, but by no means does that mean he's the only target anymore. Christian Watson, you'll see later on the list for today, I think has a higher ceiling than Allen Lazard, but Lazard for me has that safer floor in the red zone particularly. I see Aaron Rodgers go the direction of Allen Lazard a lot with the football, lots of back shoulder fades and opportunities for him to win contested passes. So maybe Christian Watson's role grows after last week and continues to emerge as a star in this offense. But for now, in a really good matchup against the 30th ranked Titans defense, I will be plunging on Lazard in lineups where I have him. Cortland Sutton this week has the Raiders defense, a secondary that has allowed a lot of success to opposing fantasy wide receivers. It also looks rather grim that Jerry Jeudy's going to be available for this week. So if he's not out there on the field, that's just more targets that'll be distributed down to Sutton and other players. KJ Hamler also seems like he's going to be out a few weeks due to a hamstring injury. So it's kind of priming Sutton for a high volume target performance here. And then Tyler Boyd, similar things to what we talked about with Pittsburgh. Their back end is very beat up, and Boyd being the slot weapon here is a guy who I think, sees a lot of value and benefit from the shorter level route tree, the short and intermediate routes he's running in that slot position. Could get some extra targets and work here again. Chase out in this game again. Let's dive into my wide receivers 16 through 18 here. Jacoby Myers, Michael Pittman, and Devontae Smith kicking it off with the Slim Reaper himself. Now, as I said earlier in today's episode, he may get himself a boost in work, opportunities, targets, whatever you want to call it, as a result of A.J. Brown's rolled up ankle. Now, as I said earlier, I'm hoping he'll be fine and expecting that'll be the case, but even so, we might see some more work. Now, this is a tough Indianapolis Colts defensive matchup here, so I've got my eye on that. However, I do think that this Eagles team will rebound and bounce back strong after having a disappointing Week 10 performance. Overall, too, Devontae Smith, should he need to step up into that wide receiver 1 role, is fully capable of doing so. Michael Pittman here on the other side of this matchup. We just saw Terry McLaurin have wild success with less than elite quarterback play against this Philadelphia secondary. I still have a great deal of respect for the perimeter secondary players, which Pittman will be lining up against and competing against in this game. However, we saw a fast, large, and physical receiver, Terry McLaurin, get out there and do his thing last week. Now, I don't think that Michael Pittman Jr. is on the same level of an overall talent as Terry McLaurin, just from a holistic route running basis to his impact on the game of football, but I do think that there is an opportunity with Matt Ryan under center for Michael Pittman to be a lineup-worthy player. This is a guy that definitely saw his value kind of combust with Sam Ehlinger at quarterback, but Matt Ryan definitely increases his volume on a per-week basis and gives him some higher quality looks to save his week-to-week lineup value. And then Jacoby Myers here taking on the Jets. This is a tough Jets secondary. Sauce Gardner has continually proved himself to be one of the better cornerbacks in the league, and you're seeing that in most matchups this doesn't work out. Now, the first time around in Week 8, we had Jacoby as a must-sit player in this matchup. He ended up scoring a touchdown. We'll see if that's the case again here. Both teams are coming off of a bye week. If there's anything I like about Myers, though, it's that he's locked into that wide receiver 1 position for now for this football team, and I expect him to continue to be that player going forward. The floor hasn't nearly been as good. The volume hasn't been nearly as good as seasons past, but he's seeing a slightly higher touchdown conversion rate than he's had in his first 2 seasons, or excuse me, his first few seasons, I believe. I forget what year he's in. He's 25 or 26 years old. But Jacoby Myers, to this point in his career, has definitely not been a touchdown guy, so it's nice to see him getting some of that red zone work. All right, diving into our next tier here, this is a very interesting one where we've got ourselves Amari Cooper and Gabe Davis, which are certainly players that, if this were ideal weather circumstances, could probably go in the 4th tier or somewhere around that range. I actually had Amari Cooper as my wide receiver 9 for the week prior to hearing about the absolutely atrocious weather in Buffalo. So basically, if the weather just doesn't permit passing conditions, these 2 players might be must-sit candidates this week. And we're going to have to wait until game time to see, Fox NFL Sunday or wherever those guys are carrying around their camera sets on the field to see just how crappy it is outside. But right now it sounds absolutely terrible. I would love to play in this game. I think it'd be super fun to get out there and play in a blizzard. One of the things I always wanted to do was play a football game in the snow, but maybe not 4 feet of it. That might be a bit extreme. These guys, though, as dependent players in the past game, 20 to 30 mile per hour winds, that's a big red flag, and you saw this last year with New England and Buffalo. They were not able, I think, what did Mac Jones throw 3 passes in that game? Josh Allen threw a little bit more because his passes and his arm strength can kind of cut through the wind, but still shaky, dicey stuff that you don't really want to rely on here. Garrett Wilson taking on New England this week had a great deal of success in the Week 8 matchup. He's also been kind of rolling here with stacking performances of success on a weekly basis. If he can continue to do this, he'll assert himself as a weekly flex level player. I do like his upside and ceiling because the talent is great. If Zach Wilson continues to prioritize him as his top option in the passing game, he can do nice things here. Deontay Johnson taking on Cincinnati this week. Cincy, of course, still without their top cornerback, Chidobe Awuzie, for the rest of this season. They have impressed me and kind of proved me wrong to an extent in the games without him, though. They've been more effective in the secondary, and their defense has continued to play well despite his absence. So for a bad Pittsburgh offense, I still feel a bit skeptical to be super excited about Deontay. His floor has not been the same as it's been the last couple of seasons. The ceiling has been nowhere remotely close to where it's been as well. So it's kind of rolling the dice here, hoping that last week the overall competence of scoring 20 points and seeing Kenny Pickett run around the pocket and make some plays with his legs can translate into something more here. But again, that might be a bit wishful thinking. It's really the caliber of player that keeps him at this wide receiver 22 spot for me. Christian Watson, let's dive into one of the budding rookie potential breakouts from last week. Now, what I always like to see before declaring someone as a breakout candidate is seeing them have multiple weeks of stacked success in similar usages in their offense. So if Christian Watson comes out here this week and once again converts on deep shots in a really good matchup against Tennessee here, I'll be all in on him. He's got a great frame. He's got the size to put up touchdown numbers in the red zone. And again, as a vertical weapon, he has a lot that he brings to the table here. And Aaron Rodgers has really raved about him a lot more than you hear him typically do from rookie receivers. And that's been something that's been kind of encouraging to hear here. Even before his Dallas game where he had, 4 for 107 on 8 targets. He had 2 drops in the first drive, but Rodgers had really no choice but to keep going back to him. He talked about watching film earlier on in the season and seeing Watson streaming wide open across the field and needing to get him more looks. That happened here. So if we can stack some successful games here and go back to him, he could potentially slot himself in as a weekly lineup play with incredible upside as potentially Rodgers' top target in this offense. We don't know. Maybe he surpasses Lazard here. Dobbs is going to be out 4 or 5 more weeks. I think it was his first game missed here in week 10 against Dallas. So things to keep your eye on. Rondale Moore, a very good slot option for this week, probably has a higher floor than Christian Watson, maybe a little bit of a lower ceiling, but at the end of the day, he was very good with Colt McCoy last week. He soaked up those slot targets and produced the opportunities given. This week he has San Francisco. It's a tougher matchup. That might make him a bit more of a red flag. You can argue for these last 2 players to be knocked down into tier 7, but I do think they bring enough to the table. And then Josh Palmer here taking on Kansas City. This should be a pass-happy game script for both teams. I said this earlier in the week in the must-start episode for streaming candidates this week. If you find yourself in a situation where either Keenan Allen, Mike Williams are both are playing on the field on Sunday Night Football, they're not going to be 100% healthy. They're not going to be the fullest versions of themselves. I think that gives a lot of opportunity to Josh Palmer to fit back into working against number 2 or number 3 coverage for this team and really thriving as the truly healthy player on the offense that has kind of the recent chemistry developed with Justin Herbert. Not saying that Allen and Mike Williams lost their chemistry, but rather him and Josh Palmer may have had an opportunity to progress there. So stuff I like, just thinking about that in this week's matchup. And again, I expect the Chargers to air it out quite a bit in this contest. Yes, how could I forget here? So I was talking about the Seahawks wide receivers and talking about being without Christian Kirk. I literally missed all of the players better than them when just off the top of my head rattling off some of the Week 11 bye players. So we're missing Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle this week as well. In addition to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I was just kind of searching through the player pool that we've got down here, looking through some of the lost names. Heck, even Julio Jones is a no-show for this week due to the bye. So craziness that I just errantly missed over there. So forgive me. It's okay. We've got the rankings under control here. Next up is Tier 7. This is our final tier for today. My wide receivers 26 through 30. Darnell Mooney kicking it off against the Atlanta Falcons. All I like about this matchup is the matchup. The opposing defense, the Atlanta Falcons, are very poor and allow a good deal of fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Darnell Mooney, being still the wide receiver 1 for this team at the current moment, has the best chemistry with Justin Fields and has been, associated with this offense and playbook for the longest period of time. I trust him more than Chase Claypool, and if he's going to make a big play, it should be against this defense. Don't feel super comfortable starting him, but it is a high upside option. Curtis Samuel this week, of course, taking on the Houston Texans as a slot receiver. He's getting opportunities in the run game. He's getting quick passes in space. You like the usage. It's toned down a little bit here since seeing Carson Wentz under command. It's been a little bit of a shift back towards the alpha, Terry McLaurin, but Curtis does still provide some lineup appeal. Kadarius Toney has a whole lot of lineup appeal this week. A lot of and I shouldn't say that was a terrible way of wording that. He has a low floor, let's put it that way, but his ceiling could be tremendous against a Chargers team that has struggled against opposing fantasy receivers, and Kadarius Toney looked really good last week. He had a 44% snap share, which is not sexy at all, but it is improving. His role in this offense is growing. He may be forced into having a larger role if Juju can't play and if Mecole Hardman once again misses this week's game. So he could slot into the wide receiver 1 or 1A role behind Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I do think that Kadarius is a much more dynamic player and you can use him a lot more creatively. He was involved in both the rushing and receiving phases of the game in Week 10. DJ Moore against Baltimore. I absolutely hate the situation. Baker Mayfield is the reason why. As a starting quarterback, DJ has been abysmal this season with Baker at the helm for this quarterback or for this team and for the wide receiver position. He has been a nightmare for fantasy football. I'm not having it. I don't want anything to do with it. Unfortunately, I talked about this in the sit episode as well. I have a super deep league where I believe there is 3 or 4 flex positions. I believe it's actually 3 flexes and 3 wide receivers. DJ has to be in the lineup this week. Very unfortunate circumstances. I'll just be holding my breath and nose through that one and hoping that he can somehow get loose beyond the defense for a score. And then Adam Thielen against Dallas. Not a super intriguing matchup at all, but Thielen has consistently seen around 7 targets per game this year. He's a talented player. The touchdown production has majorly dipped this season. You could make an argument for someone else to come in here and take over this wide receiver 30 role, and Allen Robinson perhaps. I don't love his circumstances either, though. I think that offense is just going to be a disaster. We shall see, though. Thielen is, like I said, has been thought of in the past as a touchdown-dependent wide receiver, too. The touchdowns aren't heading his direction at nearly as high of a clip this year, so his stock has obviously taken quite the dip. Dallas, though, is a matchup where Justin Jefferson after last week should be getting a whole lot of attention, so if he happens to see some lighter coverage on his half of the field, he could get some increased work and make some plays happen there. And Kirk Cousins, to be honest, has shown me growth as a quarterback, and this is going to sound weird in what I'm saying, but his reliance on Justin Jefferson growing shows that he understands that that's the guy that's open and needs the football in his hands and needs to be targeted an insanely high number of times per game. So bad for Thielen's stock, making it sound like, and I do believe this is the case, a very weak wide receiver 30 for Week 11 fantasy. This would not be the case had we had any of the 8 to 10 guys we're missing on bye week or the 2 elite players that are injured right now. So just thinking about that, Thielen should be or could be, if everyone was healthy, my wide receiver 38 to 42, somewhere in that range, if that were the case. But that's not the world we live in here today. So as always, those are our top 30 wide receivers for Week 11. If you guys enjoyed, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, check out some of our other videos from Week 11 as well. As always, your comments are welcome down below. Questions, whatever you've got for me, I'm happy to help and be a resource for you guys this season. And I will see you in the running backs tier episode if you haven't watched it yet, which you can check out right now. Peace out.